Hello and welcome to my first ever podcast and first ever episode. Today's episode is called Freezing in Place for a New Balance, which I guess kind of sounds Star Wars-like, but really I'm aiming more for Clash of the Titans today. And hello, I'm Jo B. I'm your podcast host for what I am calling Petrify the Patriarchy. I am an unlearning coach and consultant. I'm also a writer, curriculum designer, speaker, an educator. I was a classroom teacher for many, many years. And I'm embarking on a new journey, and I'm here to guide you on that journey, especially the one that might just challenge everything you thought you knew about power, purpose, and what it means to be truly free. So my question is, have you ever felt it? And by it, I mean that subtle pressure, the unspoken rule, the invisible hand guiding your choices or shaping your worth or dimming your light. And maybe it's also the pressure to be nice, to always put others first, to compete relentlessly, or to silence your own intuition. And that, my friends, is the pervasive, unseen influence of patriarchal culture. And for too long, we've been told the solution is to smash it, to burn it down, to wage war. But what if there's a different path? What if instead we could freeze it? I want to start by defining Petrify the Patriarchy. What do I mean by that? It's the core idea behind this podcast, Petrifying the Patriarchy. I've done a ton of research on what petrifying means and what patriarchy also means, and I want to bring the two together to have really succinct conversation. And no, it's not going to include destruction or violence or to add fuel to the fire, though I think we've all felt like it's beyond time to do just that, particularly politically currently. And probably not many would blame us if we did decide to do that. But I really think it's something far more alchemical and far more enduring. So think of it like this. When something is petrified, it becomes stone. It stops moving, it stops growing, it stops exerting its living, active influence. It's still there, right? But its power to control, to harm, to dictate is rendered inert. It becomes a relic, something that we can observe, learn from, understand, but we can do that without actively shaping our present or future. Imagine a raging river that's carved canyons for millennia. To cross it safely, or maybe to build a new structure, let's say we don't have to dry it up completely. What if we could freeze it? Then we could walk across it, study its patterns, really get to see what it's doing. And finally, learn where we could direct its flow in a way that better serves life, not just its own unstoppable momentum. And that's what I'm doing here. I want to talk about freezing the harmful currents of patriarchy so we can finally gain our footing, shift our perspective, and intentionally redirect our lives and societies toward balance. But first, I really want to start with Medusa. Medusa is perhaps one of the most misunderstood figures in Greek mythology, often depicted as a villain, a monstrous villain at that. However, her original story and many modern interpretations reveal a much more human, complex, and tragic figure. Medusa originally was a beautiful mortal woman, and in some versions of the myth, she was a priestess of Athena, bound by a vow of celibacy. Her beauty was legendary. Poseidon, the god of the sea, desired her and, in an act of sexual assault, raped her in Athena's temple. Athena, enraged by the defilement of her sacred space, punished Medusa, not Poseidon, for this violation by transforming her into a hideous gorgon with snakes for hair and a gaze that turned anyone to look at her to stone. She was then exiled to a remote island, where later she was hunted down and beheaded by Perseus, who then used her head as a weapon before ultimately discarding it. In more contemporary retellings, Medusa is often seen not as a monster, but as a victim of patriarchal power and divine injustice. Athena's punishment is reinterpreted as a form of protection. By turning Medusa into a gorgon, Athena gives her a potent defense mechanism against further violation. Her horrifying appearance and petrifying gaze become a shield, which deters anyone who would approach her with any ill intent. Yes, it's a grotesque transformation, and one that grants her autonomy and safety in a world that failed to protect her. I'm going to say that again. In a world that failed to protect her. Her gaze, which turns men to stone, can be seen as a mirror, forcing them to confront their own monstrousness, their own rapaciousness, or their own fear, and it causes them to freeze in their tracks, completely disempowered. So, why Medusa? Why petrify? And why this idea of unlearning? This isn't just an academic exercise for me, though I can admit that academia is my trauma response to patriarchal systems, and one that I've studied for years and years and done tons of research on. This work was born from decades of my own deep and very often uncomfortable process of unlearning. Like so many of you, I grew up soaking in the invisible ink of patriarchal norms, and I learned to tie my worth to external validation, my achievements, my appearance, my ability to quote-unquote perform. I learned to suppress my emotions, to rationalize everything, and to often question my own intuition in favor of external authority. But somewhere along the way, those little whispers of my own spirit began to grow louder and louder, and louder than what the world dictates. I began to ask myself, is this truly me? Is this really healthy? Is this really how I want to live? Is this really what I want? Period. And that's when the deep dive really began. I discovered that truly dismantling these external systems requires an equally powerful internal shift. It requires confronting the parts of ourselves that have internalized these norms, or really our shadows. And it requires reconnecting with ancient, profound sources of power, wisdom, and balance, often found in the neglected energies of the divine feminine and the potent practice of ritual. My own journey has been very messy, 1,000% transformative, and incredibly liberating. And it's this path, this unique fusion of deep self-inquiry, ancestral wisdom, and intentional action that I'm really excited to share with you. So, why is this freezing in place so important? Because patriarchy, at its heart, is an extreme imbalance. It's an overemphasis on certain forms of power, control, hierarchy, and rigid logic, among many other things, at the expense of others like intuition, collaboration, emotional intelligence, community. To petrify isn't about reversing the imbalance, but about restoring equilibrium. It's about bringing all parts of ourselves and all forms of power into harmonious alignment. In the coming episodes, I'm going to dive deeper into the true strength of the feminine and what does that mean beyond stereotypes? What is it to be potent and transformative with your own power? We're going to be learning to be comfortable with discomfort, because truly unlearning means facing uncomfortable truths within ourselves and about the world. And this is where real shadow work begins. We'll talk about the crucial difference between intent and impact, and how understanding this difference can really revolutionize your relationships and your role in collective change. We'll talk about why expecting and accepting non-closure is not a defeat, but a liberating superpower in an ongoing journey that will spiral around for new perspectives. And finally, how to build your own rituals to consciously shift energy, embody your own power, and solidify and embody your unlearning. Each episode will offer insights and reflections to empower your process of petrifying the patriarchy in your life and on your terms. But I want to go back and I want to reframe Medusa from victim to empowered. Medusa's gaze forces confrontation. To look at her is to be frozen. This directly links to your shadow work. The unlearning process often requires us to look directly at uncomfortable truths, our own internalized biases, our complicity, the ugly realities of systemic and institutional oppression. And in doing so, we are forced to freeze those old patterns, rethink them, and maybe do something differently. Her gaze is a mirror that reflects the true nature of the beholder, stopping them in their tracks. This is exactly what shadow work does. It forces us to see our own hidden, unintegrated aspects, stopping us from unconsciously perpetuating harm. Medusa embodies a fierce, formidable aspect of the divine feminine, a protective, boundary-setting power that is often demonized by patriarchal narratives. Her snakes, which are considered symbols and wisdom and transformation in other cultures, but here in the US, generally used to signify her monstrousness, which is a patriarchal distortion. By bringing her into the narrative, you reclaim this powerful, often feared feminine energy. It's about saying, yes, the divine feminine can be beautiful and nurturing, and it can also be fierce, protective, and capable of stopping oppression dead in its tracks. So this is just the beginning. If you're really ready to reclaim your full power, to contribute to a world built on balance and authenticity, and to explore the magic of your own unlearning journey, then make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode of Petrify the Patriarchy. You can also find more resources and explore my unlearning consulting and coaching services and learn about speaking engagements at my website, movingmaxim.com. I'm also found on most of the big social media platforms, again at Moving Maxim or Moving Maxim LLC. I'll be sure to link those all in the show notes. I really want to thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to show up, and thank you for taking the time to do this vital work. Until next time, may you find the strength to face your shadows and the wisdom to embrace your balance. Jo B signing off. Until next time.